Hello there. So I am doing a solo episode today because it is the 1 year anniversary of the Yoke and Abundance Wise Women podcast. Yay to us. A humongous thank you to all of the people that have really made this podcast happen over the last year. From everyone that, last year in early 2018 funded the Kickstarter to make this podcast happen, to Ira, the incredible producer, sound magician that makes this podcast run on a day-to-day basis, and all of the beautiful, wise women who have been kind enough to say yes to me, to share their story with me and with all of you. And a huge thank you to every single one of you listeners out there who listen to this podcast, who have taken a moment to share this podcast with friends or family or on social media, or who have popped over to iTunes to write us a review and share why you like what it is that we're doing. Thank you. I was recently asked by a friend, what have I learned in doing the Yoke and Abundance Wise Women podcast, and why did I start? So I think the first place to begin is why did I start the Yoke and Abundance Wise Women podcast? There's the story that I tell that whenever I run a panel, I typically share the story that the Wise Women series was born out of the fact that, I started a yoga studio, and 6 months after that yoga studio opened, another yoga studio opened about a mile down the road from where my studio was, and it seemed like they had a bigger budget, it seemed like they had the right location, it seemed like they were on point in a way that I just was not on point. And I honestly struggled with some feelings of major jealousy, and then I felt bad about myself for feelings of being jealous, and I wanted very, very, very much to be the type of person in the world who lived from a place of abundance, who practiced what I preached as far as, the yoga and my yoga and living and walking my yoga. And that to me meant believing that there is more than enough to go around. And there came a point where I realized that even though I wanted to live from a place of abundance, that I was really getting stuck in a little bit of this feeling of jealousy. And I have become a positive psychology practitioner, and I now know the language. I was realizing that my emotions around jealousy were not wrong or bad. What I was learning was that I was getting stuck there. So even though my feelings weren't bad and I wasn't acting on those feelings, I was stuck in those feelings, and I needed to teach myself a lesson. I needed to do something to get myself unstuck. And I really thought about that, and I learned that it wasn't that I learned, it was I realized that I knew a lot of women. There were a lot of women in my life who were doing really courageous, neat things, and a lot of women who were, living from a place of abundance, and they were cool, and they were doing really, really powerful work in the world. And I wanted to, 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 I wanted I wanted to embrace that. I wanted to highlight that. I wanted to really get to know what they were doing and why they were doing it on a deeper level. And I figured I would share that with the world. That would be, I wouldn't just tell them, I'm jealous and I need your wisdom to break out of this jealousy. But I started just saying, I want to share what you're doing with the world. And that's where the Yoke and Abundance Wise Women blog series came from, teaching myself that lesson. And then it blossomed into me realizing, as I have been able to interview so many women. I mean, you know, I've been interviewing women since the fall of 2016, I believe, on the blog. And now we are in 2019, so, you know, 2.5, almost 3 years worth of blog interviews. And these stories for me were so compelling and so interesting, and I was getting to take them deeper on the panel, but I wanted to take the stories even deeper. I wanted to talk a little bit more, because what I realized is every single one of us has wisdom within. Every single one of us has this deep wisdom to share. And that might need to be by sharing that wisdom with ourselves first, and then putting it out in the world in a greater way. But we do all have wisdom to share. And it is my great hope that when women listen to this podcast, they hear themselves in the women being interviewed, that they can recognize that wisdom, that deep ancient wisdom that is in all of us, in the other women. So it's the most important thing to me is that all of you listening to this see the wisdom in yourself. I hope that when you hear something really powerful from one of the women that I have on the podcast, that you're able to recognize it in you. That's why I do this work. That is why I do the Yoke and Abundance Wise Women podcast. And I hope that this last year of interviews has been a powerful journey for you as well. And obviously it's evolved over the last year. I just think that the format, that the questions, we've been able to take the questions deep. We've had a diversity of women in age, in ethnicity, in backgrounds, in work that they do. And I find that compelling. I preach that core values are really important. So as a coach working with women, I preach how important it is to to know your core values and connect with your core values. And that's not different for this podcast, and it's not different for my business. Yoke and Abundance, some of the core values are creativity, abundance, diversity, and what's most compelling for me is to get different messages and different women on this podcast who have different things to say and have different backgrounds and different ethnicities and different ages and different businesses and unique perspectives that are nothing like mine. And often there are streams of commonality, and that's wonderful. But I think that I continue to do the work that I'm doing because there's so many women out there that are doing really beautiful things, and they need a platform to connect with other women out there. So over this last year, we've tried a lot of different things. It's been really fun. I do one-on-one interviews now. Sometimes I will record the panels that we do, the Yoke and Abundance Wise Women panels. We have had just panels on a certain topic on the podcast. And I've done solo episodes like this one that I'm doing right now that oddly for me are probably the most uncomfortable to do. And today I even added a layer of more uncomfortable because I am recording this and I'm going to put it up on YouTube as I have been doing. So if you're someone that wants to see the uncut, unedited, just how it is, as it is version, you'll be able to check this out on YouTube as well. But a while back, I asked listeners if they would submit questions that they were curious about and wanted me to answer. And I got some fantastic questions back. And one of those questions is, what is positive psychology? I've already mentioned it a few times on today's podcast. I mention it quite frequently. I am a positive psychology practitioner. And what that means is, the work that I do outside of the podcast is that I am a coach. I am a leadership and business coach, and I use the tools of creativity and positive psychology to help mostly women, sometimes some men too, but mostly women transform, to step into their power, to, identify what they most want and get after it and start living in alignment with their true selves. And positive psychology is a huge part of the work that I do. When I decided that I was going to be a coach, instead of doing a traditional coaching program and coaching certification program, I knew that I'd already done a lot of the work that they do in a traditional coaching program through my yoga certification programs. And I am not just a 200-hour certified yoga instructor. I also have that next level of certification, the 300 hours, and I've taken quite a few CE yoga workshops on top of that as well. So the yoga studio that I do the majority of my training at, they used to joke that they were going to have to create 1,000-hour training just for me, because I did so many of the trainings with the different instructors that came through. And so I knew that a traditional coaching program was not for me. I knew that the work that I do with clients on a one-on-one basis, in a group setting, and in my workshops and on my retreats, I knew that for me, I wanted to be able to back it up with research. I knew that I wanted to see if what I thought the exercises, or what they call in positive psychology, interventions, I wanted to know that what I was doing had research to back it up. And that was one of the most important things to me. And so I took a positive psychology certification program through the Flourishing Center. They have a number of classes all throughout the United States and even in different parts of the world. And it's typically a 7-month program, and you meet once a month. And it's like an all-day Saturday, all-day Sunday, and a Zoom meeting then once a week type of program with lots of reading and self-study in between. But the positive psychology is, the technical definition is from Seligman, is that positive psychology is the scientific study of optimal human functioning. It aims to discover and promote the factors that allow individuals and communities to thrive. So traditionally, psychology was, way back in the day when psychology was beginning as a science and a study, it was always meant to be the study of not just what's wrong with people, but what's right with people as well. But after World War II, so many people were coming back and having pretty significant issues that the majority of the research dollars went towards fixing things that were wrong instead of studying what was right with us. And so positive psychology has really been spearheaded by a gentleman named Chris Peterson, and he's one of the founding fathers of positive psychology. And he says it is about helping people move north of neutral. And he says that he can sum up positive psychology in 3 words: that other people matter. So this is really about moving us north of neutral to helping us flourish and thrive and grow. And it's really all about finding, our identity, our meaning, and our purpose in life. And so if you are working with a coach, if you're someone that wants to hone that inner wisdom, if you want to be a leader, and sometimes we are just leaders of one of ourselves, we're leaders of a group, if you have a business and you want to take that business forward, if you whatever it is, if you have an idea for something, if you want to stay in the company that you're in and you just want to develop and grow, coaching, especially with someone like me that has a positive psychology background, it is probably a good place to start. Positive psychology is a study of the total being, the good, the bad, the ugly, the gray, the everything between. What helps us? All of that is about positive psychology. And there's just there's one more thing that from my positive psychology book that I want to share from the Flourishing Center. It's that, traditional psychology, it was based on that disease model of fixing what's wrong with people, but from this perspective, the best you could hope for is neutral, or being not sick. Positive psychology focus on going north of neutral, of enhancing the positive aspects of people's lives. Just because a person is not sick does not necessarily mean that they're healthy, right? Just because they are not depressed does not mean they are happy or fulfilled in their lives. So the work that I do with women is all about flourishing. How can you flourish in your relationships? How can you give meaning to your work? How do you find meaning and purpose on a day-to-day? That's what the crux of my coaching is all about. So that's what positive psychology is, and I do use it and some of the techniques in my group coaching and my individual coaching. Another question that I got are what are my personal core values? And sometimes I touch on these during the podcast often, but my personal core values are health, growth, sovereignty, mindfulness, and creativity. And I think all of those kind of come out in the podcast in one way or another. Health is really important to me because, to me, if our bodies are not healthy, then we are distracted from being the best human beings that we can be. If we are sick, we're not able to show up in the world, and that health to me is a total body thing. Like, I see a therapist, I have a coach, I make it a point to meditate as often as I can. Sometimes that's daily, sometimes it's not daily. I try to run 3 to 4 times a week. I get to yoga 3 to 4 times a week. I try to eat in a way that makes my body feel good, and that doesn't necessarily mean fruits and vegetables every day. I mean, the healthy breakfast for me this morning was 2 pieces of toast and an egg. And that's not necessarily fruits and vegetables, and it's certainly not fat-free, but to me that's health. Growth is a huge, huge core value of mine, and it starts with being healthy. First, I have to be healthy so that I can devote time to self-study, my morning pages every single day, really getting to know me and connecting with my why and my purpose, reading self-help books, taking classes, continuing to be a student. Creativity, my goodness. That also goes back to the morning pages. All of my a lot of the processes that I've done, that I work with clients on, are processes that have been transformational in my own life. So I certainly ask all of my clients to to work with the book The Artist's Way, because I believe that creativity is everything. Creativity makes the world go round. If we are here, it is because our parents had an act of creativity. Sex, sexuality, that's creativity. The way we dress every day, the way we put on our makeup, the way we do our hair, the books that we read, the way we design a spreadsheet, the way that we interact with one another, all of that is creativity. Creativity does not have to look like watercolor or visiting a museum, but it can be those things as well. And for me, using creativity to draw out who we are, to get to know ourselves better, to get to know others better, to get to know the world better is transformational. And so, that's part of why creativity is not only a core value of mine, but it's a tool that I use in my coaching with clients because I think it is so important. Mindfulness, I think that's really important. Like all of you, I have challenging relationships. I have challenges in my life, a lot of challenges in my life, and mindfulness is a tool. Getting quiet, meditating, that is a tool that helps me grow, that takes me to my highest self, that helps me show up for others in a better way, to show up in the work that I'm doing. So I think that if I can be mindful, mindful to me relates to thoughtfulness. I want to make sure that I am being thoughtful in the work that I'm doing, thoughtful in my interactions with others. But if I haven't practiced getting quiet, if I haven't practiced pausing and paying attention, then how can I expect myself to be able to do that on the world? So that's part of why that's really important to me. Sovereignty, freedom, that is a huge, just ginormous value for me. It's probably the root of entrepreneurship for me, is being able to do things on my terms. Having the freedom to get up and start working, having the freedom to not set an alarm in the morning on most days, having the freedom to work as much as I want to, work on weekends sometimes, but because I was able to take a nap in the afternoon to nurture my health, that's really important to me. So those are my core values. Those are what make me tick, and I think that core values are really the key to life in a lot of ways. And so working with clients in my, especially my individual and my group coaching programs, it's one of the first things we do in the first or second session that we're working together, is figuring out what your core values are, and are you in alignment with them? And if not, what can we do to get you in alignment with them? That's a practice, and it's a practice of self-discovery and growth. Another question that I got is why do I coach? I coach because I know what it feels like to not live in alignment with your core values. And when I was living a life that was not in alignment with my core values, it was pretty dark. And not dark in the way that I'm experiencing a little bit of darkness right now with being in the middle of filing for bankruptcy and losing my dad. Not that kind of dark, but like this darkness of just feeling hopeless. That things were not right, and I didn't know why they weren't right, and I didn't know how to make them right. I coach because I think that when we are in alignment, when we know what we want, when we are working towards figuring out what we want, sometimes we don't know, and coaching is a process of getting to know that. And I love to do that work with women because I know what it feels like to not have been where you want, to be, and trying to figure it out, and needing that clarity, needing purpose, needing direction, and sometimes just needing a push in the right direction, needing a cheerleader, needing that unbiased person. I coach because I think I'm good at it. I do think I have talent around listening to those that I'm working with, and hearing what they're truly saying, and being able to reflect that back to them in a non-confrontational way that really shows you what's going on, and helping you get the bird's eye view of your life that it's very difficult to get from friends and family, and then getting some action steps to take away that I help coach you to set for yourself. So, I'm not necessarily super comfortable tooting my own horn in some ways, but I coach because I think it was the thing that I was put on this earth to do, and I think that my talents and my skill set and my background really has led me to where I am on this path. And, I am so lucky to get to be that guide for those that choose to work with me. I also got some interesting questions about, what did I do at my corporate job, and what are some of the biggest lessons that I learned at that corporate job. I worked for an insurance company here in Greensboro, a very large national insurance company in Greensboro, and I was an internal life insurance wholesaler. I spent 6 years as a internal annuity wholesaler, and then I spent 4 years as an internal life insurance wholesaler. And that's a really fancy way to say that I worked with financial advisors, and I educated them on the products for the company that I was working on, and I taught them how to use and sell those products, and I learned about other insurance products, and really did my best to help advisors see where our products fit for their clients, and how we could benefit their clients. And all of that was about relationship building. It was not so much about selling. It was more about building relationships with the financial advisors that I was working with. The biggest lessons in those 10 years were, I realized I had a really strong work ethic. I realized that I could achieve pretty much anything that I set my mind to. I did very well for myself in that career, as far as in the specific work that I was doing. But the biggest lesson I learned there is that I knew I wasn't supposed to be there, and I was trying to climb that ladder, and everybody around me knew too that I wasn't supposed to be there. And I interviewed for 3 different leadership positions and in management at that company, and I didn't get it 3 different times. And that was with being the person that would go to those that I interviewed with and asking them what I could have done better, or what I needed to change for the next go around, and building my resume in such a way that I was changing it and trying to show up as the person that they wanted me to be, instead of as the person that I was, instead of the person that was living their own personal core values in alignment with themselves. And that is not that company's fault. That is my own fault. And I honestly, that is such a huge life lesson, and I cannot believe it took me 10 years to figure that out, that it was time to go. Good gracious. So, that's a huge lesson. A huge lesson is Be true to you. It's one thing to say it, and it's another to live it and know it and practice it. So when you know it, practice it. And that's another way to say that, for me, my intuition, I ignored it so much when I was in corporate America. And that's not their fault. That's my fault. And I can change it. And I can do things to flex my intuition muscle. If you don't use that muscle, it atrophies. Our intuition is one of the most important gifts that we have been giving, and we think just because a decision is logical that we should not move forward with that thing. But I'm here to tell you that the most logical decision you can make is to listen to your intuition, because your intuition knows so much about you. You as a person, as a being, you are taking in information every single day about what you like and what you don't like, and nobody else knows that better than you. You know what environments you flourish in and what environments you do not flourish in. You know what lights you up on a regular basis and what doesn't light you up on a regular basis. You know what your skill set is. You know what your strengths are, and you know what your weaknesses are. If you're someone that pays attention to those things, you know that better than anyone else. And that culmination of knowledge, that culmination of understanding of self is your intuition. It is your guide. And when you don't listen to all of that because you don't think it is quote unquote logical, you are doing yourself a great disservice, because that muscle begins to atrophy. Okay, let me say that again. When you ignore what you know internally to be true, you are taking your intuition, and it's like you've put it in a closet and you've shut the door and you've put a lock on it. And just like if we don't do an ab workout on a regular basis, those muscles atrophy too. And then you need to pick something up, or you want to be in that bathing suit, those muscles aren't there because you haven't used them. And it's not to say that you can't get them back. You can. There's so much that you can do to flex that intuition muscle. And the more you flex that intuition muscle, the stronger it gets. The stronger it gets. And the more you're going to be able to rely on that and know you can rely on that. And so, that's another really big lesson that I learned from being in corporate America. And that's, a huge part of why I do this podcast, is because I want to be interviewing the women that are out there that are listening to their intuition muscle. They are flexing their intuition muscle. They are in alignment with their core values, or at least they know what some of them are, and they are trying to get there, and they are working towards them, and they are going towards them. That's what's so important to me, and that's what's so fascinating and so interesting to me about interviewing the women that I've been getting to interview on this podcast. And it is an honor to get to do that work. So those are some of the lessons I learned from corporate America, and those the follow-up question to that is what lessons did I learn that have helped me as an entrepreneur? And I would say that those lessons, especially the intuition lessons, they have been the most useful in my work as an entrepreneur, but also as a coach, is listening, following my intuition, learning how to connect with my inner being, and teaching clients how to to connect with that true inner place of knowing. That could not have been a greater lesson. Again, I just wish it hadn't taken me 10 years, but whatever. I'm here now and I'm doing the work. So I want to talk a little bit about, where I want this podcast to go in year number 2. And, moving into the second year of the podcast, I would love to say that I want to continue having these conversations. I would love to develop the community of Yoke and Abundance more. So, and what I mean by that is, please, join our mailing list. please join the Facebook group, the Yoke and Abundance Connection and Community Facebook group. I want to hear from you. So if you are listening to this, you are exactly the person that I want to be talking to, and I want to have a dialogue and a communication with you. I want to know what you liked about each episode. I want to know what you want to see more of. I want to know what struck you about the conversations that we're having. And quite frankly, the women that we're interviewing on the podcast, they want to know what you had to say, or what you thought about their words, or if it was something that you could relate to and why, or if it's not something you can relate to and why not. And you know, having that conversation and connection with one another. I want to know how you get in alignment with your core values. I want to know what entrepreneurial ideas you have. I want to know how you flex your intuition muscle. I want to know how you cultivate your creativity. I want to know what creativity means to you. So, you know, I'd really love to develop that community in our Facebook group more. If you're listening to this, you know, please jump on the Facebook group, introduce yourself, answer some of those questions, answer some of the questions that I ask women on the podcast. Let us know what you're enjoying about the podcast. You know, it's this work is for you. Absolutely, 100%. If I didn't think it was important to those listening, I wouldn't be doing it. And you know, my intuition is telling me that it is important, and I know that I have at least a certain number of downloads each week. So I know people are listening, so it's got to be important. But let me know. You know, let me know where I am on the right track. Let me know what didn't hit the mark for you, because I care about what you think about this podcast. And I want to know if there's someone that you think I need to be interviewing. Don't hesitate to shoot me a DM. If there is a question that you think I should be asking that I'm not on this podcast, let me know. Those are really important things. I want to keep having the types of women that I'm having on this podcast, you know, women that are doing something really creative, and that can be art, that can be starting a business, that can be rocking the heck out of their job in a way that is like transforming the lives of others. I want to be interviewing women that are coming from a place of abundance, that there is more than enough to go around. That's super important to me. That's what I want to continue doing. But I would also really, 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 really love to have, I've got some dream interviewees in my head. I would love to have Tara Brock on. I would love to have Marie Forleo on the podcast. I would love to have Liz Gilbert on the podcast. I would love to have the holistic psychologist on the podcast. I would love to have Abby Wambach or Glennon Doyle on the podcast. I mean, there's definitely some thought leaders out there that I would be over the moon to get to interview. So, you know, if you've got connections with any of those people out there and you know how to make me or help me make that happen for everyone listening, please share that information with me. Shoot me a DM, shoot me an email, call me, whatever you need to do, because those are additional voices that I would love to explore on this podcast. And, you know, if you've got questions, let me know. I can answer them on the podcast in the future on different episodes. But, you know, most importantly, the thing that I just want all of you to know on this anniversary is how grateful I am for every single one of you who has listened to, supported, or participated in this work of the Yoke and Abundance Wise Women podcast. So thank you so much, and happy 1-year anniversary to the Yoke and Abundance Wise Women podcast, and we will look forward to hopefully many, many more years to come. Have a fantastic day.